Oh, hey there, hi there, ho there. Welcome to Economics with Mr. Sin. Today we're going to be learning about the paradox of value. Take out your guided notes. You can find them in the description below. And let's figure out exactly what this concept is. Before we get into what the paradox of value is, we have to just figure out what value means. Now, value is hard because it's for econ. When we're talking about value and what people value something as, it's going to be different for each person. Because for you to have value for something, you have to have a need for it, a want for it. You also have to have utility for it. You have to get some satisfaction out of that product. And what you get out of that product, someone else might not get at all. So for example, some people love to play video games and others can't stand them. So for some people, they'll be more willing to pay $60 for a video game than others. Some people might only be willing to pay $1. It has to do with the utility and the satisfaction you get out of that video game that would make you want to purchase it. The other thing that something needs to have value is scarcity. There has to be some scarcity to it. If it's plentiful and anyone can get it and it's available all over the place, well then there isn't that much value there because it'll be easy to obtain. So for us to have value, we have to have scarcity and a utility. Now remember, utility will be different. So now that we understand exactly how to determine the value of something and also why the value of something will differ depending on who you talk to, we can get into the paradox of value. Now the paradox of value looks at things that are necessities that are so cheap, especially when compared to things that we don't need that are so expensive. So let's get into an example here. If we're talking about water, you can go to pretty much any restaurant right now and get water for free. You can get water for very cheap. There's water everywhere. And water is very inexpensive. Yet we all need water to live. It doesn't necessarily make sense. The demand for water is massive, and we do have a limited supply of it. But water is very cheap to the point of where most of the time you can just get it for free. Now, it's not like that everywhere in the world. It depends on where you live and how much access to water you have. But on the other hand, something like a diamond is extremely expensive, and yet there is no real need for it. It's used for engagements a lot of times in jewelry, but it doesn't serve a purpose for us to survive. It's shiny and cool to look at, yet it's very expensive. If anything, if you're thinking about it, water should be a lot more expensive than a diamond because water has so much use and we need it. All human beings need it to survive. Yet it's the opposite, and that's the paradox of value. The paradox of value looks at things and it factors in scarcity. The only reason why water, even though that is a necessity, is so cheap is because it's abundant. Now, if you look at certain parts of the world where it isn't abundant, it's a lot more expensive. And the diamond we have perceived value for because it is such a scarce resource. And so that is why that is more expensive. And that's just the paradox of value. It's looking at scarcity and also how we value things. And it takes into account kind of needs and wants. It tries to understand why something that is a need and a necessity can be so cheap, while something that doesn't really have a point can be so expensive. So hopefully the paradox of value, it makes sense. It'll look at this and it's always comparing two things. It's always comparing a need and a want, something that has a purpose and a necessity, and something that necessarily doesn't. Now, the diamond does have a purpose, it's just not a necessity to survive. Thank you for tuning in for this episode of Economics with Mr. Sin. Make sure to check out the other videos on the channel and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you next time online.